Shelby sheep was just a normal, ordinary, woolly, white sheep. She lives on Farmer Bill's farm with her friends, PJ Pig, Calvin Cow, and Millie Mouse. One day, something very strange happened to Shelby. She was passing by the water trough when she noticed a strange reflection staring back at her. It was a green sheep. Shelby looked down at herself, and it was her. Not knowing what to do, Shelby ran to the old mud hole where her best friend PJ Pig lived. When PJ saw Shelby, he was dumbfounded. "Shelby, what happened to you?" PJ questioned.
"My wool just turned green. Can you help me?" Shelby pleaded.
"I know," PJ shouted. "You can roll in the mud like I do. You would be black instead of white. That's better than green."
"Great!"
Shelby yelled. They both hopped into the old mud hole and began covering their bodies with mud. As Shelby excitedly stepped out of the mud hole, she was disappointed to see green patches of wool through the gooey mud as it dripped off her body.
"I'm sorry, Shelby,"
PJ apologized.
"It's not your fault. I guess I'll be green for the rest of my life."
Shelby sadly walked toward the pasture to do some thinking. The next thing Shelby knew, she was being nibbled by Calvin Cow.
"What are you doing?"
Shelby yelled. Calvin jumped back in surprise.
"Well, I thought you were just some more grass," he mumbled. "Why are you laying in my pasture, and why are you green?"
Calvin questioned, not really seeming to care.
"When I woke up this morning, I was green. I've tried to cover it with mud, but it just didn't work."
Calvin just stared at Shelby for a moment.
The answer is very simple," Calvin stated. "Paint."
"Paint," Shelby repeated. "That's a terrific idea. Will you help me?"
"Well, I guess I could, but only so that you'll leave me alone."
"Thank you, Calvin. Let's go."
Calvin led Shelby to an old shack near the barn. He went inside and came back carrying a can of white paint and a brush. Calvin opened the paint can, and with the paintbrush in his mouth, he began to paint Shelby. After what seemed like hours, Calvin finally stepped back and announced he was finished.
"Did it work?"
Shelby questioned. Immediately, Shelby got a sick feeling in her stomach, and she followed Calvin's gaze to the ground beneath her, and it had not worked. Paint slowly dripped to the ground, revealing Shelby's green wool once again. Calvin just turned around and started back toward his pasture, happy to be rid of Shelby and her problem. At least he tried, Shelby thought. Shelby snuck back to the barn, hoping no one would spot her. She laid down in a dark corner of the barn. Her thoughts were interrupted by a small rustling of hay.
"It must be the wind,"
Shelby reasoned to herself.
"What am I going to do? I've tried really hard to get rid of my green wool, but I just can't."
As Shelby was saying all of this, Millie Mouse was listening intently. Without wasting another minute, Millie went to work. When Shelby awoke to the cock-a-doodle-doing of the rooster, she was surprised to see a big bag of flour with a note on it. The note read, "I hope this will help solve your problem. From Millie." Millie was a very shy mouse.
"I wonder how she knew about my problem,"
Shelby thought for a moment. Then she remembered hearing a rustling in the barn the other day as she was talking to herself.
"Must have been Millie,"
Shelby decided.
"Well, I guess I should try to cover my wool with the flour since Millie went to all the trouble of getting it for me,"
Shelby doubtingly said. The flour, though, seemed to work. So Shelby left the dark barn to again play with her friends. What Shelby didn't know was that she was leaving a trail of flour behind her. When Shelby saw her friends, they were all looking at her strangely and snickering to themselves.
"Is something wrong?"
Shelby nervously questioned the others.
"What happened to your wool, Shelby?"
One of the other sheep asked.
"It looks awful green."
"Oh, no,"
Shelby yelled in despair. Shelby ran to the barn and hid again. After about an hour had passed, Shelby heard the barn door creaking open. Someone was coming. As the tall figure came closer and closer, Shelby recognized it as Farmer Bill.
Is that you, Shelby?
Asked Farmer Bill with a concerned voice.
Yes.
Shelby quietly replied.
How did you find me?
Well, I just followed the trail of flour that you left.
Shelby's mind flooded with thoughts of what Farmer Bill would do with her when he discovered her green wool.
The other sheep told me about your wool, Shelby. I think it's just great.
What?
Shelby was shocked.
It's great,
Farmer Bill repeated.
We're all different, Shelby. That makes us special and unique.
Shelby thought for a moment.
I guess you're right. The world would be a boring place if everyone looked the same.
Shelby was very excited with the thought of being unique.
What are you going to do with my green wool after you shear it?
Shelby questioned.
We'll sell it,
Farmer Bill replied enthusiastically. Farmer Bill and Shelby went to the shearing barn and sheared her green wool. Farmer Bill sent it to a large sweater company where Shelby's wool became very popular and expensive. From then on, no one ever made fun of Shelby's green wool ever again. Being unique is great.